Today, we have one more young Indian with us in the Voice of the Young series. Hello, everybody. Good to be back with you once again. Right now, we have with us Niharika Srivastava. Let's listen to her.
Thank you so much, sir, for having me, first of all. And before, we start, I will give a brief introduction about myself. And then, of course, I'll tell everyone how I landed up being an evaluator of socioeconomic development programs, which is a job that nobody seems to understand, at least in my family of non-economists, right? So I'm Niharika, and I am from a city called Lucknow. And I did my bachelor's in economics from SRCC University of Delhi, and I graduated in 2020.
Which
And
university is this? Which university?
The University of Delhi, I studied at Shri Ram College of Commerce there.
Okay, all right.
And which is a college which is notoriously famous. And I'm very proud of my batchmates for producing the best finance professionals, the best of the best management consultants that you can probably get there, and the best entrepreneurs. But
By the way,
unfortunately,
did Shah Rukh Khan study there?
no, I think he studied in Ramjas or Hansraj. I'm not very sure.
Okay.
But we
All
do
right.
have a couple of people from Bollywood there as well, who
Yeah.
I'm sure would have found themselves in a very misplaced kind of a situation. Nonetheless, I found myself being more inclined towards a subject called development economics, which I started studying at the start of the final year. And while I really liked the subject of economics, I think a lot of the subjects and a lot of the methodology that we learn seem a bit elusive in the beginning. But I think an applied subject like development economics puts it, at least for me, it put it all together. Whatever I'd learned in micro and macroeconomics, it put everything in perspective. And I think just wanting to do something socially meaningful with my training in the subject is what propelled me towards this field.
Yeah.
That being said, you interestingly brought Shah Rukh, and I'm a diehard Shah Rukh fan. But a lot of my friends know I love to act.
Yeah.
And I've been a very proactive member of the Delhi University theater circuit, and I used to write and do street plays on social issues,
What
like,
are
say,
street plays? What are street plays?
so street plays are creative art forms where you take socially relevant issues, for instance, LGBTQ rights, which are they're looked down upon, say the community is looked down upon in society, even after Section 377 of the Indian Constitution being decriminalized. What we do is we take up pressing social issues and we make them entertaining for people to observe, participate in as audience, and try to bring about that awareness and social change. And that process, while on the surface seems very simple, it's I'd say that we make it interesting by actually doing, you were saying participatory listening, but that was my first attempt at doing participatory research. So we were doing surveys with lawyers, with members of the community. I was speaking to students in general. And I think that's when I realized how important data is to, do anything. Just to make a play, data was so important.
Yeah.
So I ended up being more inclined. So while I was sitting for a lot of these very lucrative job offers, there was always this calling that I wanted to do research. And so in 2020, where I graduated, there was an interesting happening, the COVID-19 pandemic. And suddenly it felt that doing a master's degree online, that too in a subject like development, where debating and discussing and critiquing each other and what we read is so important. It's so important to be have that participatory process. It all seemed very redundant, and that's where I decided that I'm going to work and I'm
Yeah.
not going to study.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate that I had a great job offer at hand. Thanks again to the links that SRCC has across, sectors. And interestingly, the founder of the international development consulting I used to work with was also a former SRite as well. So that seemed to work out. And I think the last 3 years, just to take a halt from academia and to use whatever skills that I learned, and to use whatever critical thinking abilities that I had gathered, and to sharpen them further in the real world of
Mhm.
evaluating policies. I think that was a transformative sort of journey, and I'll talk a little bit about it. I think to say that I think the journey made me a little more mature. It brought me, when we are young, and as this is something that I really like about us youngsters, we are very positive, we are very optimistic, right? But some of us, and including me at a certain point in time, we think we'd like to make radical changes to the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
But I don't think that, nobody in this world likes radical changes. People like people are more agreeable to incremental changes, and that's something that I've realized. I came to the realities of the goods and the not so good aspects of international development, and it made me a little more mature to now be very clear of what I want out of my master's degree, which I'll be pursuing from the Paris School of Economics with a applied development economics concentration. So I think, that being said, a lot of practical experience, a lot of interesting journeys, uh, through activities in my college days helped me start, at least, um, this journey that I have had as an evaluator. So now, when I started working, to be very honest, development consulting is a very fancy sounding term.
Mhm.
And but the reality is, nobody in my family understood what it means,
Yeah.
which was hard for me to
What
explain
do
to
they
my
do? What are their professions?
so of course, I'll tell you, and I'll tell everyone. And if there's anybody out there listening and wants to get some practical exposure to the world of development programming, they must try to do something like this, probably. So what we do as consultants,
No, not what
specifically
you
on the
do. What does your family do?
my parents are doctors.
Right. Right.
So they didn't understand what was it that excited me about development
Yeah.
economics.
Yeah.
And of all things, people ask me, economics opens so many doors for you, why do you want to work for a non-profit, or why do you want to work for the government? I said, well, I think work, maybe not working for the government, but maybe working with governments, maybe working with organizations
Yeah.
that are working towards social change, is something that I get excited by. Those are the kinds of problems that I want to solve.
Yeah.
So what I told them is that, hey, there are governments, the easiest example was to say, hey, there's a Niti Aayog, or hey, there's a very big, there's a UN agency, there's a UNDP, and they want to develop a big program of certain $1 billion in a particular state in India, but they don't know what to do, or they know what they have experience in the past, but they want to make the processes better. And this is where, say, some like an evaluator like me comes in and takes a retrospective look at what's worked well, what's not worked that well, applies a range of different techniques, and tells them, these are some of the solutions that you can potentially deploy. Or we can say, these are the things that you've been doing really well, but maybe you can tweak these two other things and help them out. uh, that being said, I think what really struck me when I became an evaluator was the plurality in the kinds of methods we use, vis-a-vis the limited number of methods we're taught, very quantitative methods, which are very important. I mean, I'm not denying that they are not important. I think they are very important ways to study our society. But somewhere or the other, I think sometimes they miss stories. For example, we can have data on, say, adaptation, like climate change adaptation finance. The quantum of climate change adaptation finance is less than what's going for mitigation. It's a great fact to know. But if
Okay,
you ask,
let me just stop you there and talk a little bit, one or two sentences to mitigation means putting solar panels and windmills and
yeah,
reducing your greenhouse
CO,
gas emission.
yes,
And adaptation means realizing that climate change will come and we better adapt
adapt,
to change
yes,
to it. And what you are saying is that the money is and the focus of the public is on solar and wind and
yes,
cutting greenhouse gas emissions, which is mitigation. And there
yes,
isn't enough on adaptation. And I frankly agree with you. So I'm
yes.
happy to hear you say it in India. It's actually true that people aren't really thinking how they will adapt to it. They're thinking we can stop it, but it's already happened. It's nothing to be stopped. All right. Sorry to interrupt, but let's go ahead.
No, it's
Yeah.
great. Yes. So, I mean, as you were saying, mitigation is about reducing emissions, and adaptation is more about building that long-term resilience
Yes.
of communities, right? But that's good. That's a good data to have, that adaptation finance is less than mitigation finance. But a more important question probably is to ask, why in developing countries is adaptation more important than mitigation? Because their needs of adaptation in the global south, especially in South Asia, because I work a little more on South Asian countries, the adaptation requirements are much more than their mitigation requirements, because globally, like per capita emissions coming from countries like us are lower,
Yeah.
right? But to know why they are important, I think, to put into perspective, when I
Hmm.
went on the field, and you know, when you interact with climate vulnerable communities, specifically women, you come to realize how their lives are not that great because of the vulnerabilities they face. So, for instance, in Bangladesh, where we did a very big, like a very interesting evaluation for with the UNDP and the UNCDF. One of that was, I think, one of my key realizations, that you need to have participatory research methods. You need to have, like, we call it participatory rural appraisals,
Yeah.
where we went down to the community level, and we actually engaged with them, and to understand how the interventions, how the community resilience building, or that
Yeah.
adaptive public asset building has really helped them. How have they been capacitated?
Yeah.
So data plus stories do have, when they are sort of accelerated from bottom up to the people who are making decisions, I think that was something very new to me and quite an alien concept. I mean, nobody could have imagined in that orthodox sort of school of thought that such participatory methods do exist.
Yeah.
And it's also quite encouraging to see many of the donors that we work with. They come, when we ask them that, okay, you put a certain pot of money into a program, what is it that you'd like to see come out from the research? And so many of them say the numbers are okay, but we would really like to know the story behind the numbers. So
Yeah.
it's really great to see people being interested in participatory research methods.
Yeah. Okay. So you enjoyed your job and you've learned a lot.
Yes.
Because obviously a BCom didn't teach you anything about this job, or did it?
No, I mean, I studied economics, not
Right.
commerce
Yeah.
particularly.
Yeah.
But of course, in terms of, I think it made me more analytical, of
Yeah.
course.
But they don't teach
But
evaluation, no? They don't teach
yeah,
evaluation.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think most of my journey was most of my skill, like core skill development, which I use day in and out, which I'd say helped me uh, get to my master's school, I think, was the work that I did. And I think I'm not saying that undergrad is useless. I mean, you need an undergrad degree, you need that education.
Mhm.
It's but of course, I think one of the things that um, in the Indian education system we tend to miss out. We become very knowledge focused at times, and we lose out on the skills and very basic 21st century skills they are being called now. Things like critical thinking or structured thinking, because the problems that we deal with as development consultants, there's never a linear relationship that, okay, if you do X, it will always lead to, say, an outcome Y. They are very convoluted relationships which may hold or may not hold in a certain context, right? um, and to do those things, and to, at the end of the day, you are an economist, but the decision maker, say the government, say the secretary, may not be an economist, and more often than not they have so less time. You have to explain to them in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So you have to have the ability to communicate in a structured manner
Yeah.
and very coherently.
Yeah.
So you cannot go to them with a 200-page report. You have to
No.
go with them
No.
with a 2-pager, and you have to summarize that in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So that is one of the learnings that I've had uh, from my journey. Another very interesting part of my journey, because I worked in quite a lot of countries for, I mean, for my age. I mean, I never expected that. Of course, I traveled to different parts of India, which of course, how different dietary diversity or diets look in Assam vis-a-vis in Uttar Pradesh or in Punjab. Because I did a lot of work on dietary diversity, that was something that I knew it, but it's always good to see it pan out in reality.
Yes.
But I think one of the greatest, the best parts of this work was to travel to, say, countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, even an African country like Lesotho, where I worked in. And you can really compare your country or another country with different countries, and you can see development, the different development trajectory, how
Yeah.
history or the local political economy impacts the way things pan out. So, for example, I worked on this program focusing on agriculture and food systems in South Asia, and it had
Yeah.
5 countries. And I realized that we are very different countries, speaking like in terms of the way um, governments operate, or in terms of the way policy making works. Say, for example, Nepal, which is a relatively new democracy, but its own, it's fragile in its own sense. India is an older democracy, and Bangladesh has had its own trajectory
Yeah.
or its own way of coming to the social development outcomes that it's often lauded for, right? So we are very different, but I also realize we have a lot of common problems,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of potential for countries to learn from each other.
Yeah.
So, for example, just like Bhutan is a very small country and it's like carbon negative, but the attitudes of their people towards the environment, I mean, it's so ingrained in their value system as a country, and even in their policy making, and even say gender norms. I mean, it's very heartening to see that, and it's always even a lot of countries can learn from each other in this way. And of course, because when you go to the field, there's also this other aspect of what you read in textbooks. You can also see it pan out in real life. So it's one of my favorite examples that I tell everyone when somebody asks me, why should I go to the field? And
Yeah.
I tell them, you should go to the field for two things:
Yeah.
to see whatever you've studied in the textbook, does it work in real life or whether it does not? And number two, to build empathy, because that's very important. So when to just give you an example, to make it a little more real for somebody who's listening, the first part where I say that to see whether textbook economics works. So one of the things people say is this resource curse, right?
Yes.
There are countries with a bunch of resources, but
Yes.
they're very poor, or they have a lot of corruption, or they're not able to get to that standard of living for their citizens, right? It's very true. I mean, Lesotho was a country whose primary source of income is exporting water to South Africa.
Yeah.
So they export water. So you would say, or you would think, just if I tell you this fact, you will think, okay, this country probably has a lot of water. That's why they're doing that. But the reality is, if you go to the countryside, the key issue that is plaguing the people who are living in very dire, abject poverty, the real sense of the term abject poverty came to life there for me. They don't have water scarcity. So country exporting water and people don't have water in their country. So you see that pan out, in reality. Many times you would see, also there are cases, many times, like there's a whole stream of economics that's saying, okay, evidence-based policy, and the more robust the evidence is, the better policy you do, which is very good, and I also believe in that. But sometimes we forget it's also about using that evidence. But how much appetite, or what is the political will in a particular country, or not even at the national level, even at the local level, what is the political will to take that evidence and have that sort of a development bargain? Right? So those kind of things, sometimes they do play out, sometimes they don't. And then you see that it's more ideology and less of evidence playing out.
All right. But you were going to say the second reason to go to the field, empathy.
Yes. So the second reason to go to the field is to build empathy. And this is something that I started my work amidst the pandemic, right? So and one of my very first projects was doing a very high level strategic piece of work for a very big INGO to redo their strategy. It was a little bit like that. So for me, it was talking to a black screen day in and out. Right? Which is interesting because I was speaking to very, very interesting people, much more senior than I was. Some of them so I was 21 when I started working, and many of them had more than 21 years of experience. So it was exhilarating for me to have access to such senior people. But I still felt that human touch was missing. And though we were discussing about the impact that their programs say have on fishermen, or the nutrition of tea workers, or how they are improving the demand for eggs in Mozambique, things like that. But somehow that real connection was missing. But I think when I went to the field, I was able to see the ground realities for myself. I could even compare, okay, what project documents say to me and what my field says to me. I can actually empathize with the lives of those people, just to ask them how I'm not trying to do an ethnography, but I'm definitely, whenever I go, I do ask them, what do you do in a day? Especially if you go and ask this to a woman, it's very interesting to see how many hours she would say that she's doing unpaid domestic work, and she's also trying to help through remunerative activities. It's very interesting to see that. So I think it builds a lot of empathy. And I think that it just makes, as I was saying, it makes the process more participatory. And I think our research outcomes turn out to be better. We are more articulate. and we can advocate for those kind of changes better.
Okay, wonderful. Now let's turn to your future. What
Yeah.
are your plans? Where you said you were going to Paris. Do you speak French or you're just going there?
No, I have started learning French, and this is much before I decided that I'm going to go and study at the Paris School of Economics, which, by the way, I've been told is a bubble, and everything happens in English there. So I'm going to study my master's in applied economics with a development, public policy and development
Yeah,
focus,
yeah,
and essentially to become a little more robust with my methodologies,
yeah.
and to get more global perspectives from people from different countries. Yeah.
And they are giving you a scholarship or you're paying for it?
No, so the French government has been very kind and generous to me, and they have given me a scholarship which they call the Charpak France Excellence Scholarship. So that that made the decision for me very easy, that I will go to France and study.
Wonderful. Most people don't go to France for studying, as far as I know. They go for other things, but let's not discuss that.
Yeah.
What those other things are. We can leave those alone. So when are you going?
I will be so exactly 30 days from now.
Yeah.
So that's where I will be there, and yeah.
And how long? 1 year, 2 years?
It's a 2-year program with
Uh,
an internship period in the middle, which is like a 2 to 4 month period.
okay.
I'm intending to continue my work in agriculture, and at the intersection of agriculture and climate, and possibly some aspects of young people, which I think is it's a very important issue for me.
Okay. Let's see. We catch back with you by 1 year from now and see
Yes.
whether you still speak English or French. We don't know what you what you will be telling us, but I hope to hear from you a progress report on how it has gone for you. And I think it's very exciting what you've done. You've been in the field. That's very interesting and very educational. And you've seen many countries, which itself is a huge development and changes your thinking and outlook. So I'm very happy to have had you here. Anything else you want to add before we end?
No, I think thank you so much for having me, and it's been a great platform for having young voices. I think it's very much needed, because it's not there in general.
No, it's not there. That is the truth. I knew it. And so, I started this channel just for my own opinions. And then I only in February and then in April, I moved it to include other experts. And then in May of this year, I said, let's have young people, give them a place to talk. And here we are talking. So I wanted to reverse the roles. I will listen, you will talk. Okay. I will not talk, you will talk. And I think that's the key to even doing field work. When you go
Yeah.
out in the field,
Yes.
you don't talk, you listen to them. And unless you listen to them very carefully, you really may not get the message they are trying to convey, because they may be talking in a little polite way, or they may be saying things in their own way. So you have to listen. It's art. So people say I talk too much. So I said, fine, guys, in this program, I'm going to listen. So here we are.
Great.
And thank you so much. Let's say bye and see if we can catch up 1 year from now. Okay, I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Till then, let's say bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, recording is over. I want a favor, okay? We are still recording, I think. Okay. Hang on, why does it say recording is